sheets. No.
No data points. There you go.
Lots of data points in my head. So yeah, I think this goes back to when I started brewing. When one of the first beers that I did well with in a competition that actually happened at this chef school, was a dark malt. And I think it was about a 3%, and I ended up getting second place, only being beaten by bloody Paul from that, because I told him to enter his bison instead of his bread. So yeah, and it was one of those things that I've always wanted to do, because I love big beers, I love strong beers, but I also like drinking beer fast. I do have a problem of not like sipping slowly, and then when you're drinking those 6-7%ers and the pint disappears in 10 minutes, and then you've got another and another, you rapidly get to falling over. So having something that you can quaff, but doesn't make you like absolutely, let's not use swear words here, but like drunk out of your mind, it is an awesome target. But you always feel raw. It's always watery. Like you get a light beer, and there's something that's missing. So it's something that I've on and off gone to try and like improve on over my brewing career, to try and just get more body, more sweetness, more interesting flavors into something that's light. And there's multiple ways you can do this, and I know Megan has very successfully here and successfully gone the essentially alcohol-free beer route with an IPA, and there you can get away without much body because, well, you've got the hops. But I like my dark beers. I like a good stout. I want something that's got that rich flavor. And a good dark mild or something like that, when it's done right, is amazing, because you can sit there, you can drink it, you can appreciate the flavors, and enjoy what you're drinking, and still have something that like you can drink. I mean, you can drink pints and pints and pints of it, and still be kind of able to talk and hold a conversation and everything like that. Which is why I've been drinking this and stand. Yeah, standing is important. So yes, I decided to brew something for Africa Brew, because we knew that Africa Brew, the beer, was going to kick you in your ass. It's delicious, it's easily quaffable, but if you have many pints of that in a row, you're going to start struggling to walk in a straight line. And so we needed something that we could have that was like the water equivalent, but way more interesting. And so I have here I think the full name would be an oatmeal vanilla milk stout. And I see a lot of you have been drinking it and getting second glasses, thank you. So at least I know I hit the target. So yeah, let me just go. I'm just going to go briefly over the things that I've targeted with this, and my thoughts on them. And please shoot any questions, and also please shoot any personal experiences, because I think it's a hard job to get a low alcohol beer right. It's like, we know this when we're doing judging. The imperial stouts almost always score more than like the light, Irish stout. Why? Because it's easy to get flavor in when you're doing something big like that. But the task of trying to get that light beer tasting good is something that's hard, but it's totally worth going after. So when I was coming up with a recipe for this, first thing I wanted to target was body. More than anything else, it doesn't matter what you get in flavor, if there's no body to back it up, you get that watery finish. So we all know oatmeal. Oatmeal stout, lots of body. So that's a simple one. Everyone knows. You can also do wheat. You get that extra kind of just that mouthfeel that comes through that leaves you thinking there's a bit more to that beer. I didn't do wheat in this one. A little bit too much of throwing the kitchen sink, but a lot of oatmeal added to this. Given that I was aiming for very low gravity, the oatmeal ended up being about 15% of the actual grain bill.
Sorry, 1.5 or 5?
15.
15, yeah. 1.5, not 5.0. 5.0 would be
Sorry.
interesting, but I'm not sure we could. I'm not sure I would manage to actually sparge.
You wouldn't have been able to match that time.
That's a simple one. It's what everyone does. But then comes the match temperature. And now, when I started homebrewing, everyone says 64 to 68 degrees is your match temperature range. And I'm going to say rubbish. If you're wanting body, 70 is your friend. You hit 70, then you've got to be careful, because 70 is now starting to get to that point where if you overshoot, you're just killing all the enzymes.
Yep.
So you've got to be careful. But you do a nice 70-degree mash and you keep it there. And you've got to know your system. You've got to make sure your strike water's right. You've got to know the temperatures. You're going to have a lot of unfermentable sugars there. So I've always done this when trying to, well, not always, but lately I've always done 70-degree mashes whenever I want oil, and you will end up with a way higher final gravity than you would normally expect. You've got to choose the right yeast. So now, back in the day, we didn't have a lot of choice. I never liked, SO4 would be something you would put into a beer if you wanted residual sweetness. It has a horrible habit of continuing to eat the sugars long after you think fermentation's finished.
Yep.
If you're doing bottle conditioning as a home brewer or even as a commercial brewer, those beers will be fine for a month, and then they're a little bit overcarved for the next 2 months, and then you've got gushers because that yeast will just keep eating. I hate it. You do other yeasts like USO5. I always found it just ate too much sugar, left not enough body. It's a lovely yeast if you're doing a bigger beer, but if you're doing a 2%er, you end up with nothing. We're in a world now where homebrewers have the joys of Pike, and for me, I have a new favorite. I want to use it on almost everything, but for low alcohol beers, it's like one of the best. Oslo. Now Oslo, if you do a 64-degree mash, it's gonna eat those sugars all the way down. You're going to end up with this dry, low final gravity beer. But if you do a 70-degree mash, that yeast just stops. It ferments quickly, like it does. It hits its final gravity quickly, like it does, and it just stops. And you end up with a high final gravity. It doesn't add any esters. It doesn't add any phenols. It's clean. It's almost lager-like, and it's going to let the malt shine. And for me, that's the thing. It lets the malt shine. And the more the malt shines, the more you're going to get that impression of intense flavor. So then I add lactose because it's milk stout, and we need even more unfermentables. And that I think everyone knows about it. Like almost every home brewer I know has done a milk stout. And that were the basic steps I did in the brew day. What I got here was a beer that started with an original gravity of 33 points, ended at 16. So that's why you got body. There is a lot of residual sugars left, but they don't give that impression of intense sweetness or anything like that. It's not like I stopped the fermentation. Fermentation finished on itself, and then I left it for another week and let everything settle out. What that got me is a beer that's got a lot of mouthfeel. It's got the mouthfeel that you would expect from some sort of 5%er. got the flavor from the dark malt, still add a lot of that. The oatmeal brings its own mouthfeel as well. The lactose does as well. I always feel you've got to be careful with that. Too much and you start getting that, that nasty sugariness from it. I much prefer this lack of sweetness but body you get from a 70-degree mash. Because that was one of the other things. You do a 64-degree mash and your wort tastes sweet because it's easy to ferment sugars. You do a 70, it is remarkable how not sweet it tastes, even though you've done full conversion. Because those sugars don't come across like we expect sugar to in our taste buds. And much like the yeast can't eat it, we don't taste it as sweet. We taste it as more fullness. And then, finally, I guess the one thing I wanted to add to this was getting more impression of sweetness, because this beer out of the fermenter, nice and roasty, nice and full-bodied, but it needed a little bit more because it doesn't have alcohol, and alcohol brings sweetness. You know, we don't think of it that way, but alcohol has a sweetness to it. It's got a body, but it's got something that your mouth will say, this is sweetness. Not sugar, but it's there. And so for this beer, I've added vanilla extract. Use the real stuff, not the fake. What was it? It was 0.5 mils per liter, I think. Could have gone less. Could have probably gone to like 0.25 mils per liter. I think there you're playing a balancing act. Because again, it's do you want to taste the vanilla, or do you want to not know the vanilla's there, but nevertheless experience something that it's bringing? So vanilla, our minds take vanilla and our minds make vanilla taste sweet. Vanilla is not sweet, there's no sugar in it. You taste that, it's not got sugar, but your mind will tell you, as long as you've got enough body, your mind will tell you that it's sweet. Plays tricks on you like that. It's a tricksy thing. And so you can use that to get that impression of even more sweetness of a sweet stout that you would expect from a 6%er. You're still not getting what alcohol brings. I don't know if you're ever going to be able to get what alcohol brings. I have some ideas. I'm going to try some things. Unfortunately, time was not on my side. I'm very tempted to try and make this a light chili milk stout. Add enough chili, because now, so Megan used to make a chili porter, and when you got it right, that burn doesn't hit your mouth, it hits the warmth. That, like, when you swallow it, you get that warmth, and then finally the burn comes to your mouth. And I'm intrigued to see what that would do on a beer like this, where you get just a tiny amount, not enough to even burn, but enough to add a sensation of warmth, much like alcohol does. It may or may not work, it might not. It may be less sessionable then, because the more you drink, the more it will start to burn. This is why we need to try it. And yeah, that's about it. Any questions?
IBUs, did you lower, like say you did a normal 5%, so how much? What IBU, then how much did you lower?
For me, I ended up making the IBUs on this in the low 20s. Now, if you were going for a beer that didn't have much residual body, that would be too much, it would be too intensely bitter. But because this has so much residual body and sugars remaining, you can get away with that kind of like IBU range of the 20s. Because I mean, they always do that bitterness to gravity ratio. And I think they use, I'm trying to remember what that, usually that's the original gravity used in that ratio. But to my mind, it's actually more important to think about where your final gravity is when dealing with bitterness. Because if I had made this, say, 14 IBUs or something crazy low, it would have just been too lacking. It would have managed to be sweet, but it would have been cloying. So I need enough bitterness, like you do with any stronger beer, I need enough bitterness to counteract that sweetness so that you're getting balance. And so yeah, 22 I think it was. I'll check after this, I'm not going to dig through the recipe now, but it was around that range.
Yeah, so I assume chocolate malts.
Carafa. Carafa Special B and Cafe Light.
Nice. And then, how did you get the purple color?
I don't know how.
Methylated spirits.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I think when it was pointed out to me, I looked at it and I was like, you're right, there was something there. Maybe it was the vanilla extract that had something. I never really compared its color, but yeah. The malt bill was very simple. It was pale, and then a bit of Munich, say the Cafe Light, the Special B, and the Carafa Type. Special, Carafa Special. Type 2, I think. So, and then yes, no late hops, obviously, just enough for bitterness, and
Yeast? Oslo, obviously.
Oslo. No, Oslo is a great yeast for that because, as I say, especially if you want body, it will, if you mash high, it will stop fermenting early, but leave you with this lovely clean beer that lets the malt or the hops or whatever, lets your recipe shine. We found that so many other yeasts add a whole lot of complexity to a beer, but when you're using Oslo, it really is about the malt and hops you put in, and it lets them shine. So, yeah.
Just me. The vanilla extract. So I'll be honest, I haven't tried to purchase vanilla extract from where we normally get from the brewers in Hillcrest. I've tried the plugs, and I've tried like the extract oil thing that from Woolies, and
That
both times.
Woolies is in this.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I put half, and you get the tiny bottle, and I put half a bottle, and it was just a 20-liter beer, and I could taste nothing.
That's interesting because I mean we put this was essentially 38 liters, I think is what I got out of the fermenter in the end. So it was a small batch, and this had, as I say, it was half a mil of that Woolworths vanilla extract per liter.
But when are you adding it? It's actually
When do you add it?
So I added it. I did it after. So I did it during just post fermentation.
Just post fermentation. So I did this straight into the keg.
Keg or bottle, yeah.
Keg or bottle.
Yeah.
I think if you do it post fermentation, depends when you do it. I think some of the yeast, if there's still yeast in the beer and it's still settling out, I think it will take a lot of it out with it. If there is even some bubbling activity going, it'll bubble it out. It's volatile. It's very volatile. So you're going to want this, you're going to want this in the keg when you're kegging, or in the bottles when you're bottling, so it can't escape.
Good question.
Oh,
But it is an interesting thing on when to add
Make
that.
your
So.
own vanilla extract as well, with vodka and vanilla.
Yes.
Pod.
I love adding extracts to beer to get certain flavors, and however you do it, whether you're buying the Woolworths one or you're making your own with an alcohol extract, get pipettes. The more accurate, the better. Luckily, Megan has high accuracy scientific pipettes, so I can do really, really, really detailed measurements. But you just need to be able to measure stuff ahead of time. And then when you're about to bottle, you pour yourself a pint and mix until you get to where you want it. And then that goes into the keg, that goes into the bottles, and you'll be almost always dead on at that point.
Just one more question. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. It definitely will help. I'm going to try it. I saw something else, and I also tried it with the almond, and it's a hazelnut extract.
Okay.
That's also at Woolies, and I thought maybe vanilla and hazelnut might be quite nice in a beer, if
Yeah.
it's like a stout. So would it make sense to do it in the same way? And
Yes.
bottle it?
Absolutely. So we do a nut extract. We put nuts on 70%, and we leave it for a year, and it takes all the essential flavors out of the nuts. We chuck the nuts away eventually. Or you can
No, he lies.
I eat them.
Get slopped on 2 nuts.
But if you're using a 7% alcohol, it's not that strong that it actually removes the stringency, but it takes all the flavor out of the nut. So yes, you can make your own.
And yes, you mix a small amount of vanilla, mix a small amount of the nut extract, see how it tastes. You just got to make sure you know exactly how much you're adding to, how much you're adding to.
Be sober
And
when
at
you
that
do
point-
it.
Yeah, be sober when you do it.
Just remember that nuts have got oils in them, and it will destroy your head retention. So
Yes.
you have to take into
emulsify.
consideration that.
I will come back to that as well, because that's maybe you want to talk about that. But you first.
No, I was thinking if you use a vanilla pod, for example,
Yeah.
because you can't put vanilla pod per bottle, that's crazy expensive. Would you actually scrape out the seeds and do that per bottle, or
So,
would you?
in my opinion, like what they've said, like always. So if you're doing something like a vanilla pod, I would never put the actual pod in the beer. I would always do a clean alcohol extraction. So it just takes like vodka. You can take that vanilla pod, soak it in vodka, and almost all of that vanilla flavor is going to go out to that vodka. It's going to be, it's amazing how intense you can get it, to the point where you are putting a milliliter or 2 into a bottle of that vodka, and it will be an intense vanilla. The students did at the school did a beer this year where they took vanilla smoked porter, and there was one vanilla pod. Or was it more? Oh no, they went a bit overboard because they had access to vanilla pods.
They didn't buy it.
Yeah, they didn't buy it themselves. So they did 2 vanilla pods into a 20-liter batch. You couldn't taste the smoke.
Yes.
It was intense vanilla. It was nothing but vanilla. So yeah. Back to the nut oils. And I'm now borrowing from this is not to do with light beers, but I'm borrowing from Megan's experiences with peanut butter porter. One of the nut oils, I think if you do an alcohol extraction, the oils are
Nullified.
nullified. Well, they're the oils that you're getting out are into the actual alcohol extraction, so you don't have that head retention problem. If, however, you are throwing some form of nut into the beer itself, the best thing about that is all that oil flows to the surface. So if you have a fermenter, or you're bottling with bottling one, and you bottle from the bottom, all but the last few bottles or kegs are actually not that bad with head retention. Because they're only with your peanut butter porter. Most of the kegs could have nice, thick head. That final keg was slimy and peanut buttery and delicious. Looked horrible. But it is one of those things that where if you think you're getting nut oils or any kind of significant amount of oil, then letting it sit in that beer for a little bit so that the oils can float to the top will make your head retention way better for almost all of what you bottled.
But also what we found is like in raw nuts versus roasted nuts, they've got so many different flavors. And roasted nuts in the oven and roasted nuts over a fire,
Well, that's going to be.
it's like it also
Cappuccino.
two different like in kind of fish, you know. So if you want to use nuts, just play with your nuts.
That's the last word from Albie today. That's the quote of the conference.
And now we can go.
Steve, I need to just
Maybe a
sign
note
out.
like if you
So guys, go, finish.
I'm finished.
So guys, what we're going to do now, we're going to set up. We've got 5 minutes to get another beer. And then you're going to hear me say we started, run inside and get seated. Stop, that'll be.
Chair. And I don't know
Eén slaapkamer.
Sorry, daar iets kan met
The other thing is never over roast your nuts.
Let me go on. It's the river song.
Okay, everybody, we started. You can please come in. Everybody outside, we're about to start.
Yes, that curry smells amazing.
Okay.
No more discussion on that.
Okay, we all here?
I'm here.
Okay, so guys, put up your hand and drop it. Okay, I'm handing you over to Trevor, and he will do the rest.
Only partially there.
Hello guys, welcome to Thousand Hill Chef School. My name is Trevor.
Hello, Trevor!
And I used to be a brewer.
Son, and I'm an alcoholic.
I've got a problem with alcohol alcohol, and I'm going to tell you something that the very first time that I tried to make alcohol, I was 8 years old. Our mulberry tree at home was in full fruit. I was left at home. My brothers and sisters, much older than me, left to my own